first colonists who came to Sydney in the late 18th and early 19th centuries had come from crowded industrial cities in Britain, so it's not surprising that a particular suburban ideal began to emerge here at Hunters Hill, the Australian dream of a house of one's own, set in its own grounds. In the 1830s, many of those who were granted or who purchased land in Hunters Hill exhibited the combination of enterprise and criminality that flourished in the early years of the colony. Emancipist Mary Reeby, one of the most astute business people in the colony, purchased 110 acres here and called it Fig Tree Farm.
Welcome.
This is a very welcome surprise.
Welcome to Hunters Hill.
Fantastic, fantastic.
How are you? Yeah, how are you? Richard Quinn.
Matt McClellan.
Matt, Richard.
David Eager.
David, Richard. How are you? Welcome.
Alicia Harriet.
Richard, how are you? Richard, welcome.
Charles
welcome.
Pizzolini.
Charles.
And
Richard,
the famous
welcome.
Bill Avery.
Hello, Bill. welcome to Hunters Hill.
Yep.
We need the French connection in here.
French connection.
These two ladies are representing the Hunters Hill Levezenay Friendship Committee, which is our twinning arrangement with it's a suburb of Paris. Hunters Hill's got a wonderful French heritage.
Now, Richard, can I present two things to Hunters Hill Council? One is the whole series of maps from Barrenjoey to North Head to Parramatta to South Head and down through the Royal, Cronulla and to the Royal.
Oh, wonderful.
That's the full set
right.
to go to the council.
Okay.
And because you are part of the inaugural walk, I'm not going to pin anything on this because this is such a special kind of thing.
The rabbit might bite you.
The badge that was struck to do this walk that we are wearing is I'd like to present to you and to the council.
Oh, thanks very much,
Phil.
Phil.
So that you can remember this occasion on the first time that the walk was walked.
I must say I can see all of these being of great benefit to the whole, the whole Sydney metropolitan community in terms of the information that it's going to give people and, help them find their way and know that these wonderful walks are available for people to take. This glorious wall hanging was done by a number of Hunters Hill residents, or the Hunters Hill quilters, and it's basically representing a day in the life of Hunters Hill. So say the top left-hand corner is the Boronia Park Grandstand, which is a listed building, and Boronia Park is the hub of a lot of our sporting activities. A lot of the other buildings around it are heritage listed buildings that are significant in our building register. As you move further down, you can see the main gates of St Joseph's College, with also a representation of the cupola and statue of the Blessed Virgin that sits on top of St Joseph's College. Those gates were originally the gates of Sydney Town Hall, and Joey's bought them back in the late 1920s and set them up when they widened George Street for the Underground Railway. As we come further down, you've got Villa Maria Catholic Church, and then at the bottom what was formerly the Henley Bowling Club. You can see a Sydney ferry, Searle's Monument, which is a monument to a famous Australian rower. That monument's located on the Parramatta River. There's a number of buildings from the old Gladesville Hospital site. Again, some more significant buildings. If we go further around, you can see on the water there's a Rowing 8, and then immediately under that, of course, is the Gladesville Bridge. Again, more significant heritage buildings. Straight at the top, you can see the Hunters Hill Town Hall with the two flags flying above the Town Hall.
Always wanted to be a grip.
It was built in 1871 by Anne O'Donnell, and that's her portrait on the mantelpiece there, who was an illiterate farmhand from County Leitrim, and her husband Jacob Hillman, who was a bootmaker from Hamburg. And they came out around 1857, ended up in Hunters Hill, and were living next door in what was a little timber cottage then, Redleaf, and they borrowed £200 altogether, which is a hell of a lot of money, to buy the land, put up this building, and they also bought the land next door, which is where they had their orchard and their cows. And they had 4 children at the time, a fifth arrived later, and in the early 1880s they put a timber extension on the back, which you'll see, which was a kitchen and another bedroom. The Hillmans owned the property right through until the National Trust bought it off them. They bought it off Gladys, who was living around the corner in Ernest Street at the time. But they hadn't occupied it after 1922. It was rented out. And after the war, it became rent controlled. And that was a significant factor in its preservation, actually, because nobody wanted to buy a rent controlled property because it was not a good investment. But against that, it was not maintained. You didn't have to maintain rent-controlled properties. So it suffered from benign neglect, and that's quite often a very common situation with heritage properties, that they're saved by benign neglect. And this room here was the second bedroom, which is where the 4 or 5 kids slept all in one bed, and that was the way they did it. That's the way my parents did it. They all slept in one bed when they were kids.
From the 1840s to the 1880s, Hunters Hill developed as a residential retreat from the city, strongly influenced by an unusual number of colonists from continental Europe. Frenchman Didier Joubert purchased Mary Reeby's farm, and once his brother Jules joined him in 1854, they began subdividing land and building sandstone villas. The most notable of the Joubert houses is Passy, named after the precinct of Passy in Paris. In 1858, the Sydney Morning Herald noted that Hunters Hill is looked upon as almost a French settlement.
And they are French order, and they used to do missions in the Pacific Islands as well, and they'd often come to Hunters Hill for their respite.
In the early 21st century, Hunters Hill remains largely intact, the oldest surviving suburban example of the Australian dream, a sanctuary within a city. So it's not surprising that the Battlers, a group of 13 local women, banded together to save 20 acres of harbourside bushland from developer A.V. Jennings, who had an option to purchase the site and construct apartments, including 3 8-storey blocks. The Battlers enlisted the support of Jack Mundy and the New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation. The BLF then took the traditional black ban action used to boycott building sites and applied it to the Kelly's Bush site, thus earning the name Green Ban. They refused to work on any project at the site, and when the developer threatened to get non-union labour in, they held a meeting on a half-finished A.V. Jennings building site in North Sydney, proclaiming that if a single blade of grass was removed from Kelly's Bush, then that building would forever remain unfinished.
This was the site of the first green ban in the world, and shortly after this there were bans put down in the Rocks, Centennial Park and elsewhere, which led to a lot of our heritage being saved by direct community action as a result of incompetent political action by politicians and the greed of developers. And I say those words advisedly. They were defeated by community action, and there's many lessons to be learnt by that battle.
Beyond Kelly's Bush lies Clark's Point, known to the first Australians as Mukululubar, a rather more euphonious appellation. It almost seems that the Europeans, having wiped out between 50 and 90% of local people with smallpox in 1789 and dispossessing the survivors, couldn't be content until even the names they had left behind were removed. As Richard Windare put it in 1842, how is it that our minds are not satisfied? What means this whispering in the bottom of our hearts?
Well, that headland that obscures part of the bridge and the Blues Point Tower is Ball's Head Reserve, and we walked around there yesterday on the way to the Greenwich Wharf, around the foreshore and up higher and through the tunnels of the old coal loader.
It's this point, Clark's Point, Mukululubar, that divides the upper reaches of Sydney Harbour into the Lane Cove River, which we crossed this morning at Fig Tree Bridge, and the Parramatta River, which will proceed up tomorrow. Clark's Point was favoured by the maritime industry for its deep water frontage and proximity to the shipbuilding works on Cockatoo Island. Time has swept away most evidence of past industrial greatness, but Mort's Dry Dock, which opened in 1901, remains more or less intact and vaguely reminiscent of Egyptian antiquity.
The Cassillon, which is right up at the end of the dock, and that's like a floating dam that is floated once the craft is brought in and propped up a little bit. The Cassillon, which is up the end here, is floated up and put sideways across the mouth of the dock and filled with water. It then becomes a dam, and it drops down into a registered groove, and the water can be pumped out. So it acts as a floating dam to seal off the dock itself. And it's right up the end, and it's in poor repair because the pumps to pump this dry are no longer functioning.
Maud's dock is no longer dry, but despite the rain, we walkers are. So we head for the Woolwich Pier Hotel, where we'll enjoy a cleansing ale and a bit later, a good dinner.
Schooner of light. Len, what would you like? Lemon and bitters. Lemon and bitters. John?
Hot chocolate for Lee.
Nice and warm. This is well worthwhile drink.